Hi, Assalamualaikum Madam. My name is Adam bin Ghazali and my metric number is 2021-123077 and I'll be the group leader for group 1.
Hi and Assalamualaikum to lecturer Madam Shahizad Ismail. My name is Nur Ali Hani binti Muhammad Azhar. My student ID is 2021107477.
Assalamualaikum and hi, I'm Muhammad Azman. My metric number 20211-08403.
Hai, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Nama saya Muhammad Dini bin Abdul Wahab dan nombor metrik saya adalah 2021109787. Daripada kumpulan 1 akan membentangkan tentang ekonomi di Malaysia.
Hi, my name is Nur Shazliana binti Ahmad Sharudin and my metric number is 2021111-085.
To start off the presentation of unemployment in Malaysia, I'll go through the introduction and background of the country first. As for the location, Malaysia is the country located in the Southeast Asia, just north of the equator, and is bordered by Thailand in the north, Singapore in the south, and Sumatra Island across the Strait of Malacca in the southwest, and with Brunei and Kalimantan in the west part of Malaysia. Malaysia is composed of two regions, which are Peninsular Malaysia, also known as Semenanjung, and East Malaysia, which is part of the Borneo Island. And these two regions are separated by the South China Sea with a distance of approximately 640 kilometers. The capital city of Malaysia would be Kuala Lumpur, which is located in the Federal Territory Malaysia in the peninsula, and that is where the Petronas Twin Tower, 9th tallest building in the world, is. As for the topographical features of the country, the peninsula are covered with its mountainous core of Titi Wangsa Range that forms the backbone of peninsula with coastal lowlands bordering it. East Malaysia, in the other hand, are a lot of difference, as it has flat coastal plain, hill and valley regions, and mountainous backbone with summits ranging up to 4,101 meters tall, which is where the Mount Kinabalu is and measured at. Okay, next I'll talk briefly about the history of Malaysia. The civilization history of Malaysia was previously known as Malaya or Tanah Melayu, and the original inhabitants of Malaya were farmers that practiced slash and burn agriculture. Then these farmers started using metal tools and they settled along coast and river by fishing and growing crops to survive at around 7,000 before centuries. Later in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, many central government emerged in Malaysia, and one of the greatest was a government in the north called Kedah Tua, which marked the civilization of Malayan people back then. The Malayan civilization before Islam came was heavily influenced by India with the religions of Buddha and Hindu, along with influence in the Malayan law and writings, which were result as Srivijaya domination in the peninsula and also part of Borneo in the 7th and 8th century. Next, Malaysia then were first occupied by British in Penang on 1786, then Singapore in 1819, and followed with the surrender of Malacca in 1824 by the Dutch to British as part of the Treaty of London. The occupation of British in Malaya got even as far as to Sarawak, where British began occupying Sarawak in 1841 as James Brooke were rewarded with Sarawak by Sultan of Brunei for crushing the rebels in Brunei at that time. Over the time, British managed to enlarge their territory in Malaysia as they increased their influence and occupation to more states, which are Selangor, Pahang and Negeri Sembilan, as these states were forced to accept protection from British in 1895. Later, in the early years of 20th centuries, British again extended their territory and influence by formally absorbing the northern Malay states, which are Kedah, Kelantan and Terengganu, into British Malaya. Johor was the last state to be occupied by British in 1914. Then lastly, the Japanese occupation of Malaysia started on 8 December 1941, when the Japanese military troops invaded the peninsula of Malaysia and quickly overran the territorialized states left by the British military when they withdrew into Singapore across the Strait settlements on 31st January 1942. The Japanese troops then also successfully invaded Singapore against British on 8 February 1942 before the last British troops surrendered 7 days later. Malaysia started to become independent on 1944 when Japanese were defeated by British in Malaya. So subsequent to that, the British government decided to form Malayan Union by combining the Malayan states, except for Singapore, though some changes were made into the plan, and instead the British formed the Federation of Malaya on 1st February 1948. Constitution of Malaya was prepared by the Right Commission in 1955 before Malaya became independent on 31st August 1957 and led by Tunku Abdul Rahman as the first ever Prime Minister of Malaya. As for the last part of introduction, I will also talk about the economy of Malaysia. Malaysia, according to the World Bank, is an upper middle income country where its manufacturing sector, including electronics, has become the leading economic sector of Malaysia, to be followed by agricultural economic activity that is comprised of agriculture, livestock, forestry and fisheries, aside from hospitality and tourism sector. In addition, the production and exportation of raw materials like crude oil, palm oil, tin and rubber remain as the primary industry in Malaysia, where it contributes significantly to socio-economic development of this country, while also being the largest producer of rubber and one of the largest producer of cocoa, palm oil, tropical hardwoods, pepper and tin in the world. These are only some of the economic activities that is considered significant to Malaysia, but in reality, there are actually a lot more than that, which means Malaysia really maximizes its natural resources to be the pioneer of raw materials producer and a fast developing country which are determined to become a developed one by the year 2050. To be a developed country also means to create employments and have a strong economic growth. So therefore, Malaysia interconnect with foreign countries for international trade through diplomacy by being open to global for trades and investments, which results in GDP of 359 billion US dollar in 2021 and a staggering number of 380 and 440 billion US dollar projected for the year of 2022 and 2023 respectively, which the data were provided by Trading Economics on the web. But does those big numbers translate to a low inflation and unemployment rate that would be expected from emerging to developed country remains a question that we would walk through next. Okay, now I will also talk about the macroeconomic issue of Malaysia, which in this case would be unemployment. I'll start with the introduction to unemployment and end with the definition of unemployment. Okay, macroeconomics studies the occurrence of economic issues which have such a big impact on Malaysia's national economy. The macroeconomic usually study on matter relating to inflation and unemployment, the causes of it and also the effect of it on household, firm and country as a whole. Though the study is not entirely about those two issues only, as there are also studies about economic growth and collapse. But in this report, we would only focus specifically on the macroeconomic issue of unemployment in Malaysia. Previously, Malaysia has had a low unemployment rate at 3.9% on Q4 2019. That is pre-pandemic. Then rose to 4.61% on 2020 as the masses loses their job during the pandemic. This is due to the crash of the worldwide economy, including Malaysia during the pandemic, as a result of lockdowns, which stopped the tourism sectors and other contact-intensive services from operating. Many countries like Malaysia are dependent on its tourism industry as the industry contributes large sum of revenue to the national GDP. And as for the Malaysia, the revenue from tourism industry dropped from 102.03 billion ringgit on 2019 to only 28.53 billion ringgit on 2020. These figures shows that the businesses that relates and interconnects to tourism experience big losses and therefore have to either downsize by laying off employees or are not capable of hiring new employees, which results in unemployment. And then as for the definition of unemployment, alright, to explain unemployment in a simple way, it is when a person who are jobless and is actively seeking for a job at a working age of 15 to 64 years old are unable to get employed. While it does not matter the position or sector of the work, due to unavoidable circumstances like health issues and shortage of job opportunities, for instance. Also, there are 3 forms of unemployment, and each of these forms of unemployment has different source or reason of its occurrence. So therefore, we would walk through the definition of each of these forms of unemployment separately. Next.
Okay, now I will present about types of unemployment in Malaysia. There are 3 types of unemployment. The first one is structural unemployment. Structural unemployment is resulting from the deterioration of industrial structure, not being able to compete or adapt to changing demand and new products or changing production methods. Therefore, this will also cause unemployment in Malaysia not to work just because the jobs offered do not match and they do not have skill in fields. For the example, an employee is fired due to not being an expert in the field he or she working in and not have basic knowledge in that field and making him or her unable to do his or her job. This state that skill and knowledge in the field taken are also important for us to work and also offer a job from company, and we also need to apply for jobs according to the field and skill we know. Now, the second type of unemployment is frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment refers to short terms or temporary unemployment that occurs when people enter the labor market to find work or people leave their jobs, either voluntary or asked to leave, and are unemployed for a period of time while they seek a new job. This frictional unemployment also applies to those who just left school and also those who have just graduated from any university in Malaysia. By the way, this also become imperfect because some of them take too long to get a new job after leaving their job. Frictional unemployment can also occur if there are changes in demand and supply in Malaysia. For example, if they take too long to find a new job for themselves, it can cause the rate in frictional unemployment to increase and also increase the employment rate in Malaysia. And the last one is cyclical unemployment. The cyclical unemployment is caused by a lack of demand in declining business cycle or recession. This is due to the recession of space in the enterprise and the large number of employees who quit their jobs to cut off the costs. Moreover, cyclical unemployment is also known as short demand unemployment, occurring when there is not enough aggregate, which is people looking for jobs. This cyclical unemployment can also affect the employees if there is a company that suffers losses and is forced to close the company. This will cause the percentage in cyclical unemployment will increase, and also this matter will be serious if there is no solutions. Next, we will proceed with level of unemployment in Malaysia. Through the unemployment data in Malaysia that's reported by the age market show a decrease and increase in the rate of unemployment in Malaysia from March 2020 to July 2021, which is 4.8 percentage unemployment in all categories of unemployment in Malaysia. Therefore, things like this need to be emphasized by the Malaysian government to solve this unemployment problem. Next, I will continue about the causes of unemployment in Malaysia. Among the causes for unemployment in Malaysia is unstable economy, which can be the main cause of unemployment in Malaysia today. Part of the main reason, the economic problem also has other causes and also cause the unemployment in Malaysia. Unstable economy in Malaysia, it can be the number of unemployed to increase because companies or workplaces have to lay off some of their employees. Next reason for unemployment causes is lack of work experience. With lack of experience by job applicants, it is very difficult to be accepted in the jobs and position offered. That's all from me. Thank you.
Government policy implemented by Malaysia to control the unemployment issues. First, monetary policy. Monetary policy is a set of tools used by a country's central bank to stimulate the financial system. Monetary policy also can grow the economy, especially while having economic problems. The goal of monetary policy is to increase consumer and business spending by increasing the money supply through various measures that can improve the economy. The intended purpose is an increase in the money supply, a decrease in interest rate, and increase in demand. Monetary policy affects the level of unemployment in the economy. It also can expand generally to reduce unemployment as the higher money supply stimulates business activity, leading to the expansion of the labor market. Monetary policy increases aggregate demand and economic growth through interest rates cut. The central bank can influence interest rates by changing the discount rate. The discount rate is the interest rate charged by central bank to the bank for short-term loans. For example, if the central bank raised the discount rate, the cost of borrowing for banks increase. After that, banks will raise the interest rates they charge to their customers. Therefore, the cost of borrowing in the economy will increase and the money supply will decrease. The public can spend more money and will invest more if they find it easy to borrow money. This will increase aggregate demand and can reduce cyclical unemployment at present. Moreover, when interest rates become lower, the exchange rate will also become lower and the economy's export will be competitive. Policymakers can introduce specific initiatives focused on specific areas of the economy to reduce unemployment and production growth. Examples of those precise initiatives include streamlining the approval process for government projects that create jobs, providing cash incentive to corporations to hire employees, and paying corporations to educate employees to fill specific positions. Depending on its objective, monetary policy can be expansionary or contractionary. Expansionary monetary policy. It is a monetary policy that aims to increasing the money supply in the economy by lowering interest rates, buying government securities by the central bank, and lowering the reserve requirement for banks. Expansion policies reduce unemployment and stimulate business activity and consumer spending. The overall goal of expansionary monetary policy is to drive economic growth. Contractionary monetary policy. The aim of contractionary monetary policy is to reduce the money supply with the economy. It can be achieved by raising interest rate, selling government bonds, and increasing reserve requirement for banks. This contractionary policy is used when the government wants to control the extent of inflation.
Next, fiscal policy. Fiscal policy refers to the activities government in Malaysia take in connection to taxation and government spending are referred to as fiscal. Malaysia governments employ fiscal policy to try to control the economy. Government try to raise or decrease the velocity of money by raising or lowering taxes and spending, which can affect the inflation and consumer spending. Fiscal policy is significant because it influences the amount of money Malaysia consumers take home, because taxation is such an important aspect of fiscal policy. If the government decides to raise taxes, it affects households in Malaysia to disposable income. Households are unable to spend as much as they used to due to the reduced income levels, affecting demand and hence jobs in the wider economy. The expansionary of fiscal policy is, firstly, fiscal policy is closely linked to the budget deficit and surplus as it dictates at how government spends and receives money. Next, fiscal policy refers to how government spends money and how the money received through taxation. It also increased government borrowing will be necessary for an expansionary fiscal policy, which may not be feasible for nations with high debt level and rising bond yields. Long-term expansionary fiscal policy may result in crowding out where the government increases spending but has less to spend due to borrowing from the private sectors, preventing AD from rising. Crowding out, according to Keynesian, won't happen in a liquidity trap. Fiscal policy is also influenced by Malaysia government's spending. For example, frequently employ it to stimulate the economy and create jobs around Malaysia's consumer. It accomplished it by borrowing money now in the hopes of stimulating the economy and increasing the tax revenues later. As a result, long-term taxation and economic growth pay for short-term spending. This could be to avoid a deep and damaging recession that would leave millions of people out of work, like happened during the 2020 coronavirus outbreak. During that pandemic, many consumers and people were lost job and income. So, this proved that this short-term quiet give a 50-50 benefit to governments and people. Next, direct control. Direct control in general are implemented by the government and clearly prohibit or restrict particular types of investment or economic activity. Direct government price and wages control have been advocated and implemented in the past as a means of combating inflation. As a result of the uncertainty of government decisions and political pressure to favor vested interests, many economists fear that this reactionary government measure will do more harm than benefit. As a result, it has been recommended to rely on built-in stabilizer as much as possible. So, expansion of direct control. Firstly, direct control as opposed to monetary and fiscal controls might be more discriminatory. Next, they may be added or altered fast and simply resulting in rapid consequence. Third, in different industries, the intensity of control action can vary from time to time. So the advantage of direct control, firstly, they are quick and simple to introduce or modify, so their effect may be felt immediately. Next, compared to monetary and fiscal control, direct control may be more discriminatory. Next, from time to time, the intensity of control operation may vary across various industries. Direct control are imposed by the government and specifically prohibit or limit specific types of investment or economic activity. Direct government restriction over wages and prices have occasionally been proposed and put into place as an anti-inflation tool, a control that is imposed directly on the production, pricing and distribution of individual commodities as opposed to an indirect or general control, like credit and fiscal policy, that which can only indirectly affect certain item and the whole economy. For hiring long-term unemployed, business may receive tax benefits or subsidies. They gain new confidence and practical experience. As a result, it will be rather expensive to and may tempt business to simply replace present employees with long-term unemployed individuals in order to reap the tax benefit. Besides that, often particular areas have higher concentration of unemployed people. The government should offer tax advantage to business who locate in economically struggling areas in order to combat this special unemployment. As an alternative, they may give money to unemployed people who relocate to places with strong unemployment rates.
Hai, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Nama saya Muhammad Dini bin Abdul Wahab dan nombor metrik saya adalah 2021109787. Daripada kumpulan 1 akan membentangkan tentang ekonomi di Malaysia. In conclusion, we can see that the economy of Malaysia is having difficulties of inflation over the years, as which is mentioned in the economy section. Malaysia currently suffered from an unemployment and low inflation rate. Moreover, unemployment in Malaysia was caused by an economy current stability. Within the times of peak COVID-19 outbreak in April 2022, the unemployment rate dropped below 4% for the first time, which started in early 2020. For instance, one of the problems that affects the unemployment is a graduate that does not have a good amount of experience in working field. Furthermore, monetary policy was implemented to counter issue unemployment in Malaysia. As it was mentioned in monetary policy, it is a set of tools used by a country's central bank to stimulate the financial system, affecting the level of unemployment in the economy, expanding generally to reduce unemployment. In addition, fiscal policy also implemented to suppress the issue towards Malaysia economy, taking in the connection towards taxation and spendings of the government. Finally, direct control implemented by the government to restrict specific types of investment activity. In 2022, Malaysia's economy has been inflated for 3.1% last year. The central bank target is targeting growth of between 5.3% and 6.3% this year on believing that it will rise in global demand and higher private sector expenditure. The government own official forecast is for a 5.5 to 6.5 expansion, hopefully with these implemented policies compromising the inflation towards the economy of Malaysia. As a whole, the economy recovery in 2021 was very uneven and its economy was still very weak in the second and the third quarters of 2021, and yet showed a strong recovery on the fourth quarter. At the time for now, the Malaysian economy has not fully recovered. Malaysia's vigorous economy recovery in 2022 have been faded by the number of uncertainties. However, the economic gains from greater mobility might be lower than expected. Within a weak labor markets and domestic consumption could affect the country's growth.